Imagine you are 20 years old with almost no money and someone offers you a choice. $100,000 today or 10 extra years to build wealth. Most people would take the money, but there is something they are forgetting. Money can be earned again. Opportunities can return. Even mistakes can sometimes be repaired. But 10 years of time cannot be purchased back. That is the advantage young people have, and it is one of the most underestimated advantages in personal finance. You do not need to be rich at 20. You need to start giving your money time, because wealth rarely appears in one dramatic moment. It usually begins quietly with a small amount saved, a small investment made, and a decision repeated long enough for the numbers to change. The strange thing is that when you are young, these small numbers can feel almost meaningless. $50 does not feel like wealth. $100 does not feel like freedom. And that is exactly why so many people wait. They tell themselves they will start when they earn more, when they graduate, when they get a better job, or when life finally becomes less expensive. But then 20 becomes 25. 25 becomes 30. The salary gets bigger, but so do the bills. And suddenly, the person who thought they were waiting for the right moment realizes they have been waiting for years. Now imagine two people. They earn similar incomes. They have similar opportunities. Neither starts with a huge inheritance. But one begins building at 20, while the other decides to wait until 30. They both invest the same amount every month after that. The difference is not intelligence. It is not talent. It is not even income. One person simply gave the money 10 additional years to work. This is where compound growth becomes powerful. Your money can generate returns, and those returns can remain invested and potentially generate returns of their own. Over long periods, the effect can become substantial. Think about a snowball. At the beginning, adding another layer barely changes its size. But as it rolls, every new layer attaches to something that is already larger. The growth begins building on previous growth. That is why the first years can feel disappointing. You look at the account and wonder why nothing spectacular is happening. But the early years are not necessarily about spectacular results. They are about establishing the machine. You are building the habit, the account, the investment process, and the discipline that can eventually allow compounding to become much more visible. And there is another advantage to starting early. Your first investments do not have to be enormous. Your first goal can simply be learning how money behaves when you stop spending every dollar you receive. Maybe you begin with $20. Maybe it is 50. Maybe you have nothing to invest yet, and your first move is simply building an emergency fund or finding a way to increase your income. That still counts. Building wealth is not only about putting money into the market. It begins with creating a financial system where some of what you earn eventually becomes an asset. This distinction matters because investing without financial stability can create unnecessary stress. If every unexpected expense forces you to sell investments, the long-term plan becomes much harder to maintain. So the first advantage is time. The second is the ability to build strong financial foundations before your responsibilities become larger. When you are young, you can learn with relatively small amounts of money. You can make a budgeting mistake with $100 instead of $10,000. You can learn how credit works before taking on a massive loan. You can discover your spending habits before a family depends on your income. That is the hidden value of being early. You are not simply investing money. You are investing in your future financial behavior. Now consider what happens when your income begins to rise. Your first paycheck might be small. Your second job might pay more. Eventually, you may receive promotions, change careers, or develop a skill that dramatically increases your earning power. The danger is allowing every raise to become a lifestyle upgrade. If every increase in income immediately becomes a larger apartment, newer car, more expensive restaurants, and more subscriptions, your financial position may barely improve. Instead, imagine keeping part of your old lifestyle while directing part of every raise toward your future. Your income rises, but your investments rise too. That is how a small beginning can become meaningful. You are not relying on one giant investment. You are allowing your contributions to increase as your earning power increases. At 20, investing $100 a month might feel almost pointless. At 30, that same habit could become several $100s a month because your income has changed. The important part is that the habit already exists. You do not have to invent discipline at 30. You simply increase the size of a system you built when the numbers were smaller. And this is where the 10-year head start becomes even more interesting. Starting early gives you time to make mistakes, recover, learn, and improve before the financial consequences become enormous. You might choose the wrong investment once. You might overspend for a year. You might misunderstand a financial product. You might make a bad purchase. The lesson is not that mistakes disappear. The lesson is that learning early gives you more runway. You can correct the mistake while your financial life is still relatively simple. By contrast, waiting until your 30s can create a different kind of pressure. Retirement feels closer. Housing costs may be larger. Family responsibilities may appear. And suddenly every financial decision feels more urgent. This is why starting early does not mean trying to become rich as quickly as possible. It means giving yourself more time to become financially competent. You learn how to save. You learn how investing works. You learn what risk actually means. You learn why fees matter. You learn how taxes can affect your returns. You learn the difference between an asset and something that simply consumes your income. You learn why a high salary does not automatically create wealth. And perhaps most importantly, you learn that wealth is not the same thing as looking wealthy. A person can drive an expensive car and have almost nothing invested. Another person can live in an ordinary apartment while quietly building a portfolio worth tens of thousands of dollars. From the outside, you may not know who is actually wealthier. That is because real wealth is often invisible. It exists in ownership, savings, investments, equity, and financial flexibility. And financial flexibility is one of the greatest rewards of starting early. Imagine reaching 30 with investments already growing, an emergency fund already established, and little or no high-interest consumer debt. You are not financially finished. You are not automatically rich. But you have something extremely valuable: options. You can change jobs without immediately panicking. You can handle an unexpected expense without putting everything on a credit card. You can take a calculated career risk because your financial foundation is stronger. That is what the 10-year head start can really buy you. Not a guaranteed millionaire status. Not a perfect life. It buys you room to make better decisions. Now let's talk about the number that gets people excited: compound growth. Suppose someone invests consistently for decades and earns a reasonable long-term market return. The exact result will depend on the investments, fees, taxes, contribution amounts, and market performance. There are no guaranteed returns. Markets can fall, sometimes dramatically, but the principle remains powerful. The longer money stays invested, assuming the underlying investments perform well enough over time, the more opportunities there are for growth to build upon previous growth. This is why comparing starting at 20 with starting at 30 can be so revealing. 10 years may sound like a small difference when you're young, but financially, 10 years can represent thousands of days during which your contributions remain invested instead of sitting on the sidelines. And there is something psychological about this. When you start small, you become less obsessed with whether every individual market movement is going your way. Your attention shifts toward the process. Am I contributing consistently? Am I diversified? Are my costs reasonable? Am I investing according to a plan I actually understand? That mindset is much more useful than constantly asking whether the market will rise next week. Because nobody knows exactly what the market will do tomorrow. But you can control whether you save, whether you invest responsibly, whether you avoid unnecessary debt, and whether you keep learning. Those controllable decisions are where your advantage lives. Now imagine reaching 25. You have been investing for 5 years. Your account may still not look impressive compared with the lifestyle you see online. Someone else might have a luxury car. Someone else might travel constantly. Someone else might post a new apartment every year. You may wonder whether you are missing out. But your financial life is doing something different. Part of every paycheck is becoming ownership. Your money is slowly moving from consumption toward assets. And that transition is easy to underestimate because it does not produce an immediate emotional reward. Buying something gives you a visible result today. Investing often gives you a promise of possibilities much later. That is why building wealth requires a different relationship with patience. You have to become comfortable doing something that feels ordinary today because it may become valuable years from now. The person who understands this does not need to reject every enjoyable experience. Wealth building is not punishment. You can travel, eat out, buy things, and enjoy your 20s. The question is whether everything you earn disappears into your current lifestyle, or whether some portion is quietly building the life you want later. There is a middle ground between extreme frugality and uncontrolled spending. The goal is not to make your 20s miserable so your 70s can be comfortable. The goal is to make decisions that allow your future self to inherit something from your present self. That something could be an investment account, could be a cash reserve, could be a valuable skill, could be a business, could be freedom from high-interest debt. All of these things have one feature in common. They can improve your future financial options. And this brings us to the biggest misconception about getting ahead early. People often think the advantage belongs to those who already have money. But for most young people, the more important advantage is not starting capital. It is the combination of time, learning ability, earning potential, and flexibility. If you are 20 and have $500, your situation is not hopeless. You have an enormous amount of future earning potential ahead of you. If you are 20 and have nothing invested, that does not mean you have failed. It means your first objective is to build the system that eventually produces investable money. Get control of spending. Build useful skills. Increase your income. Create an emergency reserve. Avoid destructive debt. Then invest consistently. None of those steps sounds revolutionary. That is the point. Building wealth is often less exciting than the internet makes it look. There is no secret stock that guarantees success. There is no magic investment that removes risk. There is no shortcut that replaces years of disciplined behavior. There is simply a process. Earn, keep some, protect some, invest some, improve your skills, increase your income, repeat, then let time do what time does best. Imagine your future self at 30. They look back at 20 and see 10 years of decisions. Not 10 years of perfection, just 10 years of consistency. Maybe some investments went down. Maybe a job was lost. Maybe an emergency forced you to use savings. Maybe you spent more than you should have during certain years. But the system survived because it was built around reality, not perfection. That is another reason the head start matters. You have time to experience setbacks without allowing one setback to define your entire financial life. Now reverse the story. Imagine reaching 30 and realizing you wanted to start 10 years earlier. You cannot rewind to 20. You can only start at 30. And that is not a reason to give up. It is a reason to stop waiting. Because the second best time to build wealth is not some imaginary perfect moment. It is the moment when you finally understand that your future depends partly on what you do with today's money. If you are already 30, start at 30. If you are 40, start at 40. The lesson of the 10-year head start is not that older people are doomed. The lesson is that time has value, and delaying another year gives away another piece of something you can never recover. So if you are young, don't obsess over becoming rich immediately. Focus on becoming financially difficult to break. Learn how money works. Learn how investing works. Build an emergency fund. Develop skills that increase your earning power. Keep your lifestyle from growing faster than your income. And when you have money available for long-term investing, give it a reasonable plan and enough time to work. You do not need to predict the next winning stock. You do not need to watch the market every hour. You need a strategy you understand and the discipline to stay with it. Because 10 years from now, the biggest difference may not be one brilliant decision you made today. It may be the hundreds of ordinary decisions you repeated when nobody was watching. The money you didn't spend. The investment you automated. The debt you refused. The skill you practiced. The raise you partially invested instead of completely upgrading your lifestyle. Those decisions may feel small individually, but repeated over years, they can change the direction of your financial life. And that is why a 10-year head start is so powerful. Someone can give you money. Someone can teach you a skill. Someone can introduce you to an opportunity. But nobody can hand you 10 additional years of compounding. Nobody can sell you back the years you decided to wait. Time moves forward whether you invest it or ignore it. So if you are holding a small amount of money today, don't laugh at it because it isn't enough. Give it a job. Give yourself a system. And most importantly, give your decisions time. Because the wealth you build tomorrow begins with what you do today. And 10 years from now, you may look back and realize the greatest investment you ever made was not money. It was starting early.